Casey. I remember in high school, there was a girl named Casey. And she was a senior and I was a junior. And we were in drama class together, which I should have taken as a prophetic statement about our relationship. It would be drama. And I remember Casey and I started getting closer and started having the conversations and, sharing things and going over and having the late night conversations and laughs and the flirting and the whole thing. And she even made me the mixtape. You know what I'm talking about? You remember the mixtape? And so I got the mixtape, and so obviously we're on the front end of this dating relationship, kind of that no man's land, testing the waters, weird butterflies, like sweaty palms, like what do you call us, sort of thing. And I remember one day one of my friends in the hallway just kind of grabbed me and he was like, "Hey man, did you hear that Casey's going on a date with so-and-so?" And I'm like, I didn't hear that, So wait for the bell to ring at 3 o'clock and grab Casey outside. And I'm like, "Hey, so heard you were going on a date with that guy. Is that true?" And the worst possible response is what I got, the deer in the headlights, like I didn't think anyone would ever know. And she said, "Yeah, I thought we could date other people." And I was like, "Oh, what about the mixtape? Oh, was it all a lie?" But no, I could never listen to Pearl Jam the same way ever again. I remember just this sense of anger and betrayal. And sure, we had been hanging out for 2 weeks, but it still felt like the end of the world. You know what I'm talking about. And of course, obviously that was good. Obviously it was the best thing. I ended up meeting Summer, and boom chicka boom boom, the hotness of my wife and the amazingness in my life is better on every single level because of my wife. But have you ever been there before where it's like, "Oh, love slipped through my fingers again, and I thought that this situation would bring me love again, and it didn't, and I thought that this one would, but it slipped through my fingers again, and in the end, all you're left with is just an old, crappy mixtape." And we all have done that. That's the human condition. That's one of the things that knits us together, is this search for love, is this longing for love. It's inside the DNA of all of us that we are longing for love. Not just love on a surface level, not just love in a conversation, but really that deep DNA beneath skin level, like at the foundational level of who you are, sort of love, that we are longing for that. That's inside every single human heart, that at the end of the day, that our greatest desire, that our greatest longing, that our greatest search, that our greatest pursuit isn't for money, it's not for sex, it's not for pleasure, it's not for words, it's not for fame, it's not for any of these things. If you don't already know, let me shine the light on it for you today, that the greatest desire and the greatest search, the greatest pursuit of every single human heart is for love, is for love. And that's what our friend Solomon writes about here in the book of Proverbs, as we're in this blueprint series talking about wisdom, that Solomon kind of lays out for us the great pursuit that we all should be on. What our greatest pursuit should be is really the pursuit of authentic love. Authentic love. Authentic love. And I say authentic because we all know this, that there are plenty of non-authentic loves, right? There's lots of love imposters. Some of us have experimented more with those love imposters than others. It's the sex stuff, it's the money, it's the things that we think will satisfy. It's finally hearing "I love you" from that person. We think that it'll finally meet that thing on the inside of us. And I say authentic because authentic love is really the only thing that quenches the desire of the human heart, because sin never quenches the desire of the human heart. Sin always leaves you more empty than the day that it found you. If you haven't tasted and seen that yet, please hear it from somebody and a people who have been there, that sin always leaves you more empty than the day that it found you. And sin is always like grasping for the air. You know what I'm saying? The whole world is grasping for vapor. The whole world is trying to attain this thing outside of authentic love. And that's the way that sin works, is when you think you'll have it. Oh, if I can just get him to say this. Oh, if I can just get him to put a ring on it. Oh, if I can just get this experience. Oh, if I can just get this. And sin never satisfies, because sin says, hey, if you get this, it'll quench all the desires of your heart. And then when you finally have it, it says, well, keep looking. Keep going deeper. And that's how sin works. That's the DNA of sin. And so today, wisdom cries out aloud to get authentic love. And it's here in Proverbs 5, 6, and 7, in 3 chapters, that Solomon basically says the same thing over and over again in different ways to us. He talks about a young man who's searching for love. Yes, in all the wrong places. And we find it here. He's searching for something that he believes will bring his heart satisfaction. It's found in Proverbs 7. 5, 6, and 7, but we're going to go there to 7. We're going to put it up here on the screens, and we're actually going to go through the entire chapter, because this is a good story. It's actually a bad story, but it's a good story for us, because let me tell you, lots of people want to learn from their own mistakes, but it's much better to learn from someone else's. And so Proverbs here in Proverbs chapter 7, he says this. He says, my son, he's writing to his son. If you in here have sons, this is that sort of conversation you have with a child. He says, my son, keep my words and store up my commands within you. Keep my commands and you will live. Guard my teachings as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers. Write them on the tablet of your heart. In other words, don't forget what I'm telling you. Y'all tracking with that? Like again and again. He's saying, say to wisdom, you're my sister, and call understanding your kinsman. He says this. He says these things, wisdom will keep you from the adulteress, from the wayward woman with her seductive words. And get this, if he was writing to his daughter, he would say, it would keep you from the adulterer, from the wayward man. So just see that as both sides of this. This isn't just talking to the men in the room, it's talking to the ladies as well. And just like many of us, this young man, he's looking for love. He's looking to try and find authentic love, but all he finds is a love substitute. He's looking for this deep down love, but all he finds is an adulteress, and he thinks that will actually quench the human heart. And this thing called sexual sin, it's finding yourselves in the arms of a man or a woman who you weren't married to. That's either through an affair or sex outside of marriage. It's finding yourself in front of a computer screen watching things that you know you shouldn't be watching, or late at night watching things on TV that you know pollute your soul. It's chat rooms having conversations that we know that we shouldn't. It's not the first look, it's the second look or the third look or the 10th look that leads our heart to lust. It's trying to have something that isn't yours, but you're aching, you're longing for this thing. And let me tell you, there are few things in life that will pollute and damage the human soul like sexual sin. But this is the most often sin that we look to. This is the most often love and posture that we go to try and meet what's actually happening in our heart, the longing, the thirsting, the hungering that's inside the human heart. This is what humanity goes to, is sexual sin. And he says this, he begins to tell this story. He says, at the window of my house, I said, I looked out through the lattice and I saw among the simple. In other words, in my heart, I thought he was an idiot. I noticed among the young men a youth who lacked judgment. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house. In other words, he's curious. He's heard about what happens in this area of town. He's heard about what those sorts of websites are like. He's heard about what sort of conversations I could have. And she's heard about what happens if you just stay after work for a few extra minutes with him. There's a curiosity. If I just go there, I wonder, the excitement will begin coming up in my heart. And it says that he goes there at twilight as the day was fading, as the dark of nights is setting in. Let me just tell you, I think we all know this, that nothing good happens at twilight in a back alley. You know what I'm saying? You know what you're doing if you go to that area of town at night. You know what you're doing. And that's what's happening here. He's saying that a man is doing this so innocently. I'm not really doing anything. And he puts up this front. And I found out this, one of the quotes that I kind of hold close to my heart is that sin so often comes through a door that was intentionally left open. So I don't know how I found myself in this situation. Yes, you do. Then out came a woman to meet him. Lo and behold, surprise. Notice the approach of temptation. A woman came out to meet him dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. And I hear her voice. It says she is loud and she is defiant. Her feet never stay at home. Now she's in the street, now in the squares. At every corner she looks. In other words, sexual sin is everywhere. She took hold of him and kissed him. She seduced him. And with a brazen face said this. In other words, an unrepentant face. A face that says, I don't care what everybody else thinks. Here's what I have to say. Hear the speech of temptation. Hear the voice of sin as it's knocking at your door. She says this, I have fellowship offerings at home. Today I fulfill my vows. In other words, she just offered a sacrifice. She's a nice religious person. Oh, she's a Christian too. She goes to church every once in a while. And she says, so I came out to meet you. I looked for you and I found you. It's a false flattery. I've covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt. It's a false intimacy. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deep of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. Can you hear the voice of pornography? Can you hear the voice of the sexual morality? Can you hear the voice of the conversations brewing? Can you hear the voice of the luring away? And she says this, my husband is not at home. He's gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money and he will not be home till full moon. In other words, no one will ever know. You ever notice how sin speaks? The duplicity of it, the contradiction of it? You ever notice that? Sin says this, it says, hey, no one will ever know. And then once you do it, it says, hey, everyone knows, keep it in the dark. To get you in, it says, hey, no one will ever find out. It's all good. And then once you're in, it closes the door behind you and says, now you can't leave. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. All at once he followed her like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. I guarantee you when that man woke up that morning and said, I wonder what if, he never thought it would ever turn out like this. He says, now then, my sons, my children, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways or stray into her paths. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. Wow, it's really quiet in here. That's why I told you had to stand up first. See, some of you in the room, you're cringing because you're afraid that I'm going to talk about that one thing. Others of you, you're in the room and you're kind of already checking your watch. You're saying, I don't have any sexual sin by my standards. You know, it's all good. Let me just read you 3 quick statistics. 47% of homes in America say that pornography is a problem in the house. That's just the ones that'll say it. I don't know if you would say it if somebody called up to you, so let's just go ahead and assume that's like closer to 50 or 60%, that pornography is actually a problem in the home. 41% of marriages, people in marriages confess to either having emotional or physical affairs. You need to know this, that in our search for love, it's not just about sex. It's not just about the physical act. There's an emotional adultery that probably is the most prevalent form of adultery in the world today, that people are looking to have those emotional, to try and have that love met in a way that's outside of the covenant with their spouse. 41% say that that's taken place. Get this is the most in your face one. 74% of men, 3 out of every 4 men, and 68% of women say that they would have an affair if they would never get caught. Wow. So bear with me as I talk about the wisdom of finding authentic love, as I talk about the wisdom that God wants to rescue us from our sinful nature. And God wants to rescue us especially from this thing called sexual sin. Sexual sin. Can I be honest with you guys just for a minute? Now you're like, no, lie to us. When Summer and I came up, if you can't tell, this is kind of a serious message. Okay. When Summer and I came up to VHM when we launched 4 years ago, we came from 10 years of pouring our life into young adult ministry, 10 years of spending our lives with 20-somethings. And I remember after a few weeks up here, we were like, oh, this is awesome. Everybody's got their lives together. Like I remember thinking like, wow, this is gonna be so much easier than Fusion. Because if you don't know anything, if you can't remember what it was like, if you're past that phase, if you can't remember what it was like in your 20s, that's what every single day was. And so pretty much at least several times a week, I'm getting a phone call, I'm getting the email, hey, I'm in some form of sexual sin, like, hey, we did it again, we stumbled again, I went to the club there, I looked at this, whatever that was. I mean, it was a constant thing. And I just remember it was just part of everyday life, was trying to walk and navigate people through out of sexual sin. And I remember after coming up here for a few weeks, we were like, yes, high five. We could kind of leave that phase and just kind of move on to like, oh, now it's just going to be about discipleship. Now we're just going to open up the Bible and like we're going to sing Kumbaya and Jesus is going to come visit us in living rooms. And I remember then the conversations began and we were like, oh, this is going to be with us till the very end. Because what we have here in what you would call adult ministry is not the departure of things that you deal with in your 20s. What we have here in adult ministry is what happens when you don't deal with the sins in your 20s. And now we're here 10 years and 20 years and 30 years later, and we're seeing the fruit of the destruction of the sin. And I'm seeing divorce after divorce after divorce. And even if they're not divorced, they're just unhappily and begrudgingly living in the same home because he did this or she did that or they went there or they did it again. And here's what happens when you're in your 20s. Here's what I noticed about people in their 20s. There's an idea that you want it out of your life and your heart is bent towards confession. That's why you're more readily confessing it. That's why I would get all the phone calls and all that stuff, because people are in that phase of life saying, I don't want it in my life, I want it out. But here's what happens when you fast forward a few years. Now you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s. No longer is it something that you want out of your life and you're ready to confess. Now it's something that's become part of your life and your heart is now bent towards, and your lips are now bent towards secrecy because you want to keep it in, because you don't want to disturb the status quo and you're afraid of rocking the boat. And that's why now I don't get the phone calls until the divorce papers have already been signed. And that's why now I don't get in the conversation in the hallway until the affair has already happened. And that's why now I don't get the email or the distress signal up in the sky that says, hey, she found me looking at porn again, and this time she said she's had enough and she's taking the kids and she's leaving. What do I do now? And it looks so simple. All I did was I just walked down that street and I thought nothing was going to happen. Little did he know. So please today, I beg you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ that we would receive wisdom from the Lord, that we would take heed lest we fall, that none of us, and I mean none of us, myself included, I don't care who you are, is above this thing. And the wisdom of God is crying out for us to find authentic love, not a little petty love imposter. Let me walk you through this really quick. There are a few truths here about sexual sin. I want us to wake up to this today. Y'all still out there? All right. There's 5 truths about sexual sin. The first thing is this, is that the pain is inevitable. The lure, again, of sexual sin is to keep it in the darkness and no one will ever know. You know what I'm saying? And Proverbs 6, again, Proverbs 5, 6, and 7 really talk about the same thing for the most part. Proverbs 6:28 says, "Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched?" Verse before that says, "Can a man put hot coals in his lap and not be burned?" In other words, there's going to be a cause and effect that is inescapable, that is inevitable, that pain is always associated with sexual immorality, with sexual sins, with deviating, with trying to find a love imposter outside of the way that God created. It always hurts someone. Sexual sin always hurts you. It will hurt your spouse if you have one. It will demolish your children if you have one. It does injure the other person if another person's involved, and it always hurts the heart of God. That pain is inevitable. Let me tell you this, in all the years of doing what I've done, I've never once, Pastor Philip, you can vouch with me, I've never once had some person walk in my office and say, "I'm so glad I had an affair. I'm so glad because my life is so much better now." Because that's what sin always promises, but it never keeps its promise. The scripture says that God is not a man that he should lie. Let me tell you, the devil has no problem with lying. The devil has no problem with offering you something and not keeping his promise to you. I've never had any person say, "Man, my life, my family, everything is so much better. Even, maybe even my family, they can go over there and I'm going to pursue this other way." I've never had somebody come back and say, "Wow, that was the right choice." The only thing I've ever heard is, "If I could just go back and take that moment back, I would do it. I would give anything to have that back." I've never once had anybody come into my office and say, "Wow, I am so glad I'm addicted to pornography. It really adds value to my life." It really does. I mean, it helps me to value women better and value men better. I mean, I just see life so much more clear through the lens of pornography. It doesn't work that way because the pain is always there. The sex and sexual sins never tell you about the pain that lies on the other side of the door. All it wants you to do is get you to walk through. And then it shuts the door behind you and says, "Now you're here to stay." Sexual sins, the pain is inevitable. Second thing, the jealousy is inevitable. Jealousy is inevitable. Proverbs 6:34 says, again, in the same theme, "Jealousy arouses a husband's fury, and he will show no mercy when he takes revenge." The jealousy of a spouse, of the person of an affair, either the one you had an affair with or your own, is aroused, and especially the jealousy of God. God calls himself numerous times throughout the Old Testament, he calls himself husband. It says that jealousy arouses a husband's fury. And to the one out there who says that you're technically not having an affair because you're only looking at porn, or I'm only having sex with one person outside of marriage. We're not married, but we're having sex. So there's no jealousy associated with that. Let me tell you, 10 times God is called a jealous God. Exodus, Deuteronomy, Joshua, 1 Kings, Ezekiel, Joel, Nahum, Zechariah, Zephaniah, and the book of James. God is called a jealous God. If you think that you're outside of that, if you think no one is looking, that's the cry of sin. That's the cry of the woman in Proverbs 7 that says, "No one will ever know." Let me tell you, another way of saying no one will ever know is God does not exist. You have a husband who is jealous for you. In the book of Revelation, John sees Jesus with flaming eyes, a passionate desire of your heart, of the human heart, of longing for you, a jealous husband for you. And he says, "Stop giving away your heart to other lovers that always leave you empty." And you keep going back, trying to find that fulfillment. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool returns to his folly. Jealousy. There's always jealousy. He wants your heart. Third thing about sexual sin is the connection is inevitable. The pain is inevitable. The jealousy is inevitable. The connection is inevitable. Please hear this, because we often talk about this scripture right here in a different light, but I want you to get the depth of what's trying to say here. 1 Corinthians 6, the Apostle Paul writes a letter to the church in Corinth. 1 Corinthians 6, he's addressing sexual immorality in the church. Verse 16, he says, "Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute or anyone outside of marriage is one with her in body? For it is said, the two will become one flesh." Stop. The two will become one flesh. You're tracking with me. The two will become one flesh. Where do we get that saying from? Where do we get that reference from? Genesis 1, all the way back to the very beginning. That a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Jesus affirms that a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. A man and a wife, two will become one flesh. That's what the Old Testament and the New affirms, that marriage is between husband and wife. And when the two come together in sexual intimacy, that there is a two becoming one flesh thing that happens here. And he says this, "Do you not know that he who unites himself with a prostitute is one with her in body?" No. They're all saying, no. That's how marriage works. Marriage is the only thing. When you have sex in marriage, that's the only time that two become one flesh. He says, no. You don't get to pick and choose the rules here. He says sex brings intimacy, and sex communicates, and sex bonds. Sex is not just a physical action here. There's a joining. And he says, "But whoever is united with the Lord is one with him in spirit. Therefore flee sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against his own body." Remember that. "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit?" In other words, God isn't just this passive observer. God is right here in your midst. He's in you, whom you've received from God. You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. There's a very popular saying today that says that all sins are the same. Let me tell you, just because people say it doesn't mean that it's true. That's not in the Bible. The Bible doesn't say that all sins are the same. People say that all sins are the same. Sexual sins are different than all other sins. It says right here, because you sin against your own body. And what does that mean? It's because two will become one. There's nothing else that you can do. It's not about drugs. It's not about lying. It's not about stealing. Those things are completely different, because when you commit sexual sin with another person outside of covenant, two become one. You don't get to pick the rules. And that's why it can be days and weeks and months and even years, and it still feels like there's this weird connection. It's something that we call a soul tie. There's a connection with that person. I don't understand, because two have now become one. And what happens when two become one? You share a piece of your identity, and you share a piece of your purpose. You share a piece of who you are. And let me tell you, two become one, and you break that off, and you do that enough, and you do that enough. And that's when you find people who don't even have an identity even anymore. Their identity is locked up in sex now, because they've shared their identity with so many people. Two becoming one, two becoming one, two becoming one. They're joined to all these people, and they don't know why. Their life is spiraling out of control, and it doesn't make sense anymore. It's because they've shared who they are with so many people. See, but we see the opposite of that in marriage. Because God created two to be one. When you do it God's way, it's blessed, it's amazing. You see that when a couple gets married and two become one, and now I get to share my dreams and my heart and my vision with one other person, my identity with one other person. That's why it's almost like after a long time of being married, it's like it doesn't matter which one you see the same person, because they've become that one, that over time, that two becoming one. And God created it to be that way, but when you take it outside of authentic love, when you move it into this realm of immorality, when you move it into this realm of outside of covenant, of forever I do, when you move it outside of that, there's a tearing that happens. And that's why sexual sins are different than every other sin. No other sin that a man commits comes even close to that. Don't buy into the lie. Oh man, all sins are the same. Jesus is going to deal with it. Absolutely, Jesus can deal with it. But some things are weightier than others, because you've united yourself to another person. The connection is inevitable. The connection is inevitable. That's why they're different. The dissatisfaction is inevitable. Say that the pain is inevitable, the jealousy is inevitable, the connection is inevitable, and the dissatisfaction is inevitable. Here's the thing that, that people don't understand about affairs. You want to know what happens in an affair? They eventually dissolve. You want to know why? Because at some point, you actually have to start working on that relationship too. Oh man, the home life is all messed up. My husband, oh, he's not emotionally available. Oh, my wife, oh, she's not physically available to me. Oh, come over. Oh, and it's so, oh yes, for a day or a week or a month or months or whatever that is. And then at some point, wait, why are you starting to act like my spouse? Why are you getting all needy on me? Because two are becoming one. At some point, you have to begin working on this thing. I mean, even in porn, it's exciting for a while, but then you find out the things that used to excite you don't excite you anymore, and you have to spiral deeper into darkness. Dissatisfaction is inevitable. The sex outside of marriage, you know what happens with that, right? Either you break up and then try and tear that, and you start again, or you have to start working on the relationship. And there's something about that sort of relationship when you find out that living together outside of marriage actually increases your chance of breaking up. It actually increases your chance of divorce. Every single survey, every single one has found that. The living together outside of marriage, test driving, this thing, trying to see, are we sexually compatible? Let me tell you, if you're in here today, and you're in sexual sin, stop believing that lie, or stop letting somebody sell you that lie. Can we be honest? You are sexually compatible. All right? He has an Audi, you have an Innie. You are sexually compatible. Don't let anybody sell you the lie. Well, I want to see if, if we're really, are there going to be scorecards? Like what? That one's an 8. It doesn't work like that. Let me tell you, if you get married, you are sexually compatible. You are. Don't let anybody sell you that. Let me tell you, outside of covenant, outside of that commitment, it will always be dissatisfying because you find out that these things actually, we're basically practicing for divorce. I'm seeing if you're really compatible for me. And what happens when you actually put a ring on and then just say, I don't think you're compatible for me anymore. Outside of covenant is what that thing is about. And the reality is this, let me tell you, ladies, if he wants to have sex and he doesn't put a ring on it, then he doesn't actually love you. He's using you. Because love equals I'll be there in the morning. Love equals no fear. Perfect love casts out fear. It quells that dissatisfaction because I know that you'll always be there. Sexual sin can't make those promises. Sex outside of marriage, that immorality, that I want to have all the benefits of being married, but none of the commitment. That will never satisfy. And in the end, saying I give myself to you without commitment will always lead to destruction, always lead to dissatisfaction, will always be stressful, will always be drama, will always be like, where are we going? So that leads to the last thing, the destruction is inevitable. Pain is inevitable, the jealousy is inevitable, the connection is inevitable, the dissatisfaction is inevitable, and the destruction is inevitable. Get this, here's, again, we read Proverbs 7, Proverbs 6, and now Proverbs 5. Solomon says this in verse 7. He says, now then, my sons, again, he would say this to a daughter, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house. He says this, here's the consequences, here's the destruction. Lest you give your best strength to others and your years to one who is cruel. In other words, your youth. It's going to take your youth. Sexual sin will take your youth. Your best strength, your years, it's going to take your youth. Sexual sin will take your youth. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich another man's house. In other words, it's going to take your wealth earning years as well. It's going to take your youth and it's going to take your middle ages. And at the end of your life, you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. In other words, sexual sin will take your youth. It will take your middle ages. And at the very end, all you will be left with is regret. You will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey to my teachers or listen to my instructors. I have come to the brink of utter ruin in the midst of the whole assembly because I didn't listen to wisdom in my life. Destruction came with it. Destruction came with it. Sexual sin will take your youth. It will take your middle years. And at the very end, when you're old, all you'll be left with is regret. Destruction. And it needs to end today. It needs to end today so we could have life and life to the fullest, so that we could actually have authentic love. That's wisdom. Wisdom is not to pursue the love imposters. Wisdom is to pursue authentic love. Love that remains, love that actually quenches the thirst of the human heart. So that kind of begs the question, what is love, right? I mean, we get tons of mileage out of that. I love Big Macs. I love Ferraris. I love football. I love my wife. I love Jesus. I love my kids. And I love green beans. We can say all those things in the same sentence because there's no distinction between that word love. And it's because people don't know what love is that they get divorced every single day. People get divorced every single day because they don't actually know what love is. And the problem in the English language is that we only really have one word for love, but not in the Hebrew language. There are numerous words for love, and it's here that we begin to see what authentic love is. Biblical Hebrew words for love. Let me just run through a few of these here. First one is raya. Won't you write this down if you can, if you have a means to do that? I think this will be helpful to you. Because here you begin to find out what is authentic love. What's the way that God actually wired us? Raya. Raya is that deep friendship. Raya is that kind of best friend sort of love. You know what I'm saying? It's not necessarily romantic. It's a real love. You know what I'm saying? It's a love that I have for my best friends. I would say I love these guys. You know what I'm saying? And it's not weird. You know what I'm saying? This is a deep friendship. This is we can share dreams. We can share hopes. We can tell each other anything. And at the root of any good friendship, at the root of any good marriage is raya. Is a friendship sort of love. And again, I say this, some of you are like scholars, I say biblical Hebrew words, or maybe current Hebrew. They've kind of changed these, but when we go to the Bible, this is what we find. Raya is this deep friendship. The second one is ahava. It's a deep affection. It's a commitment sort of love. You know what I'm saying? You can say, in English, we say, I love you, and we're not really sure what that means, but now we begin to get some distinguishing that I raya or I ahava, that it's a commitment love. Jesus quotes, in the New Testament, he quotes Deuteronomy, that you would ahava the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. It's a commitment sort of love. This is almost like a covenant sort of love. Y'all tracking with me, right? That it's not friendship, and this isn't even necessarily romantic. This is a covenant. This is that I'll be there in the morning. This is that I will never leave you. I will never forsake you sort of a love. That's the raya, and then ahava. And then the third one is dod. D-O-D. This is the physical aspect of love. This is that sexual aspect of love. This is literally kind of means to rock or to fondle. I'll just kind of leave the. You can just kind of come up with your own idea of what that is. In Proverbs 7, the adulterous woman says, come, let us drink deep of dod until the morning. This sexual love, it's where in the Greek later on we get eros or erotica. This is that sort of love. It's not a perverted love. This is the love that God wired us to be able to share. But here's where we've gotten off, is that along with the rest of the world, many of us have bought into the devil's lie that sex equals love. Let me tell you, sex does not equal love, because sex is not the search for something that's missing. It should be the celebration of something that's already been found. And we try and find love outside of covenant. And we try and find we try and take this sexual love outside of covenant, outside of raya, this friendship, and it never satisfies. And we keep coming back to it over and over and over again, and we wonder why it doesn't satisfy. That's why we live in a world that's completely oversexed and completely lonely, right? You know what I'm saying? Like we keep on going to this one sort of love, this dode love. We keep on going to that thing, and the people around us keep on going to this because we think that one day it'll finally satisfy us. Oh, if I just give myself to him, one day I'll finally feel loved. Oh, if I hook up with as many ladies as I can, one day I'll finally find authentic love. And it doesn't satisfy because it can't. This dode love, it was never made to satisfy outside of being combined with the other ones. This dode love, this is the woman at the well. Remember when Jesus finds the woman at the well who's been married to 5 men and now she's living with number 6? This is that search that she's on. This is the search that the world is on. I mean, just think about an affair or sex outside of marriage. What does it do? It tries to take just the dode love, maybe a splash of raya, and it tries to find commitment and fulfillment in that. That's why an affair will never satisfy, because there's no covenant. There's no ahava. All it is dode. All it is this sexual thing, and I'm trying to find satisfaction through this one thing. And it's exciting for a day or a week or a month or something like that, but it doesn't actually meet the need of our heart because it's not authentic. I mean, you think of emotional affairs, what we're doing, she's doing it or he's doing it at the office or online or whatever it is, and we're sharing this raya. I've taken the raya outside of my marriage and I'm sharing it with someone else. I'm sharing my hopes and my dreams, and my heart's becoming disattached from my spouse. I'm taking it outside of that covenant relationship, and I'm wondering why in the end it didn't actually satisfy, because he's never promised to be there till the very end. There's no covenant. There's no commitment. There's no I'll be there in the morning, and the morning after that, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Because we were made for authentic love. We were made for authentic love. You know, in that raya, you can find that. Some of you are out there like, I'm not even married. Raya, you can find that in community. You can taste that in community. You can taste this friendship, this I can share my hopes and dreams, the love that I have for friends. You can taste that raya in community. Ahava, you can taste that with your children. You know, this covenant, I'm not going anywhere. If you have a family, I can share that with that, because there's a commitment. There's almost this unspoken covenant, you know, that we're family. I mean, we're together. That's that ahava. And then all three together is what makes an absolutely amazing marriage. Is when you have ahava, you have a relationship, you have friendship. I mean, I can share anything with this person. I know this person. You have ahava, you have this commitment. I have a friendship that I'm committed to until the very end. And it's in that place that then you can add dode love. You can add that sexual love of two becoming one, because two becoming one is only safe in the covenant of marriage when it won't be torn apart. Friend, covenant, and sexual intimacy. All that together in marriage. And I love it. I love how Solomon says this. Can we read this in the Bible? I mean, in church? Proverbs 5, verse 18, he says, "Let your wife be a fountain of blessing for you. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. She is a loving deer, a graceful doe. Let her breast satisfy you always. May you ever be intoxicated with her love." To the ladies, he says, you know, may your husband's biceps, you know, be ever intoxicating to you, you know, whatever that is for you, you know. May you'll be ever captivated. It says that love doesn't have to fade away. Love doesn't have to burn out. Love can burn on. When you have this raya and this ahava and you have this dode together, and that's how you're able to resist sexual sin, even inside the covenant of marriage. Because some people think, oh man, I gotta be one person for the rest of my life. Absolutely, that's the blessing. One person for the rest of your life, spending the rest of your days getting to know the intimacies and the intricacies, the delicacies of that person, of who they are, of their hopes and their dreams, their aspirations, of two becoming one, of sharing that with one other person till death do us part. That's how a husband is able to see a beautiful woman and not stumble. You want to know wisdom in this, guys? You want to know wisdom when you see a beautiful woman? Here's what you say in your heart. Man, she's beautiful, but that's no business to me. I got a little dough at home. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's no, what does it matter to me that she's beautiful? It's no business of mine. She's not my wife. You know, ladies, that guy at work, he's so emotionally available to me, and he listens when my husband just wants to fix my problems, but that man will listen to me. The wise woman says, man, I got a buck at home. You know what I'm saying? I got my deer there. Yeah, sure, he's emotionally available. Yeah, that's awesome for somebody else. But I've already got mine. Let's work on that. Let's work on that. And when you have that, when you have ahava, when you have raya, and when you have do together, let me tell you, there's nothing like that. And those are the things that we were made for in the flesh, but it all points to something greater. It all points to the thing that without it, no amount of love will ever satisfy, no amount of love will ever quench, because we were made to be loved and to love authentically, and it's found in this last Hebrew word. Let me give it to you. It's hesed. Put it up on the screen. Hesed. It's God's love for us. It's what you would call, it's a charitable love. It's a love that's similar to agape in the New Testament. Agape is, for God so agape the world that he gave his one and only son. It's a giving love, but it's a promised love. It's I don't have to do this, but on my behalf, I've promised to give it to you. That's this hesed love. It's the love that doesn't fail. It's not our love for God, it's God's love for us. And we as people, please hear this, we as people, we're playing out this romance with other people and eventually prayerfully with the spouse, if that's a desire that God's put in your heart, because that's how we were made. We were made to receive love. We were made to want to be loved and to love in return. And we need to understand that romance came from God. I know it's weird for some of us to think about that God made sex and God made love and God made romance. And many of us, we don't think of it in these terms, but God wants to woo your heart. I know some of us, we just kind of come in on the weekend. I get it. We were raised in maybe context or outside of an understanding that God wants to encounter you. It's that God isn't just this distant, like he sits up in heaven on a throne, God somewhere. That God is very near. He calls himself husband. He wants that's that sort of, not this weird sexual thing. It's this unquenchable fire in his eyes desire for your soul. To have all of you, to have that knowledge of you, and you to have that knowledge of him. This raya, that we know you, this friend love, and this relationship that husband and wife share. The purpose of it, ultimately, is to point back to the love that Jesus has for each one of us. That's the privilege, if you're in here and you're married today, that you have the privilege of being able to show the world the type of love that Jesus has for us. That husbands would love their wives as Christ loved the church. We get to model that. We get to show that that's the type of love that Jesus has for you, and we need to rediscover that. You know, Jesus, the Father, has been telling the story from the very beginning of this man who stepped out of heaven and engaged the earth, that he pursued a bride who was from the wrong side of town, and he selflessly gave his life for her to ransom her back. I mean, that's our story. I mean, every good romance movie has that in it because it's borrowing from the great story of God, of his love for us, that even when and even while we were his enemies, that we resented him and hated him and were unworthy of him, he still laid down his life for us. And that's the love that we need to rediscover. This is said, the type of love that God has for us, please listen, it does not love you because you're beautiful. His love makes you beautiful. He does not love you because you are worth it. His love makes you worth it. He doesn't love you because you now arrived. God never looks at you and says, hey, clean up your act. He says, hey, allow me in. We'll clean it up together. This is that love. This is that love that is so much better that sexual sin can't even hold a candle to. That's the love that God has for you. That no greater love is any man than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. And if you've accepted that, if you receive that, you are no longer a servant, you are no longer an enemy, you are now a friend. You're now a friend of God. And I pray that today, that we would receive that true, authentic, undeniable, addiction-shattering, immorality-breaking kind of love. So what we're going to do here for a few minutes, you just have a few minutes here. So the band's going to lead us just in a song, and it's more a conversation. Just encourage you, just kind of sit in this. If you have something that you want to handle with God about today, that's fine. You can come up to the front. I'll be up here. I think we all kind of got that. If you want to stay in your seat, that's fine. But I encourage you just to be in this place, especially if you have that sexual sin. If I mention it or not, you know what it is. Now's the time to handle that by receiving something better. Now's the day, by the goodness of God, that we can start over again. It's a new day. Let's encounter the love of Jesus this morning, just for a few minutes. Let's engage with this.